Hi, I'm Steve Lipton, and on this episode of Explore Art with Procreate, we're going to look at some settings and start getting ready to draw. I've gotten most of the introductory details out of the way, and let's get to making some marks. So open up Procreate, and you'll see a gallery much like this one, though probably without so many paintings. If you want to open a painting, all you have to do is you have to tap it. So I'll just tap a painting here. And there it goes, it opens up. Now, to go back to the gallery, you tap Gallery. Easy enough. Now, to start a new painting, you'll be tapping the plus on the side here, and you'll pick a screen size. Now, there's lots of screen sizes here, depending on what you are doing. And we can do all kinds of fun and exciting things about how we use these. For me, I'm going to use the screen size for most of these because that just makes life a lot easier. And for beginners, it works really well. So that's just a good way to start with it. So if in landscape like we have here, it'll open in landscape. If your iPad is in portrait, it'll open in portrait. I usually leave mine in landscape because I like that particular orientation. Next thing you're going to learn is about pinching. So you're going to pinch just like you do with most Zoom things. And you can rotate and pinch all you want to get this to zoom in and out. Now, this is really important, especially if you're going to be using your fingers to draw, but it works as well when you're using styluses like my pencil here, is that by zooming in, we can get into details and do a better job on those details than we would by just doing it on a big screen like this. All right. Now, let's look at some other things that are going to go on here. And you want to set up your setup for Procreate by going to the Actions button over here. And you'll see here that there's a whole bunch of buttons, Add, for example, and Canvas, and Share. But the one that's important to us right now is going to be Prefs. And I want to set up some settings here. Now, depending on how you like to use your interface, you may want a light interface. That's what that first button is. And if you click on that first button, you'll get a lighter interface. And if you like this brightness, that's fine. I actually like it dark. This is one of the things I do like dark. And so I'll turn that off. There's also the right-hand interface button. Now, this one requires a little bit of explanation. If you are right-handed, you're going to be drawing with your right hand. And so your non-dominant hand works well for these sliders over here. And so you can move your sliders as you're drawing. And so it's great to be on this side. Now, if you're left-handed like me, if you tap on that, then you can use your left hand as your drawing hand, and you can slide with your right hand. So depending on how you want to do things, that's up to you and your hand orientation. So you can do that whatever you want. I'm going to leave it at right-hand interface for me because that's how I happen to be left-handed. Next one's the brush cursor. I'm going to turn this one on, and let me turn and go back to the page here. And what the brush cursor does is it puts a little cursor on the screen. Now, I use this because you can now see where my pointer is on the screen. You may want to put that on and it may get annoying. So depending on how you want to use things, you may want to do that and turn on the brush cursor. I usually leave it on. It's not that much in the way. But for some people, particularly if you're using the Apple Pencil, it does tend to get in the way. Some people like to see it because it gives them some idea of size for their brush, even when they're using a pencil. Now, dynamic brush scaling, just leave this on. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but it does a lot of the scaling as you're zooming. And by using it in the dynamic brush scaling mode, it'll keep your zooms and brush sizes accurate when you're zooming. So we'll deal with that. And projecting the canvas, that's if you're using it with a second monitor. You can then send this to a second monitor if you want. That is the actions that I wanted to set up. So I'm going to just tap on the screen here. And we're going to now look at the other side. We have lots of buttons here. All the way on the right is your palette, okay? And there are all kinds of things you can do here with the palette. I usually leave it on the disk, and when we get to color, I'll explain why I leave it on the disk. There are other modes here, depending on your preferences. One I also tend to see a lot of use with is the palettes. This has a whole bunch of different palettes. Now, if you downloaded some of the exercises from before, you probably have the charcoal pattern by hitting the 3 little dots here and making it the default. Now, it's already the default, so it's not showing here. So if I go over here to Flourish, I can set that as the default, and then go back and set charcoal as the default. I also have another one that I tend to use as a default, which you'll find in this week's exercises. I don't going to use it right away, but if you want to mess with it, you can. And that's Steve Sandard, and I can set that one as a default as well. And that has more colors that I tend to use. And again, I'll explain colors when we get to the color section. For now, you can use either that one or the charcoal, or just as easily, just use this circle thing here. So this will be your hue, and then you get a brightness and saturation in here. We're almost always going to be over here somewhere, and it doesn't really matter what your hue is, although I tend to like warm colors like red oranges. But you're going to probably keep the hue and the saturation and brightness down here. We're going to be using a lot of blacks or browns. So leaving it like this is a good place for it. And the charcoal is actually just setting a whole bunch of ones like that in different hues, which gives some difference in feel. All right, the next one we're going to look at is over here, is the brush library. And the brush library is all of our brushes and which ones we can pick. I have charcoal picked here, but you can look at other ones along the way. And there are lots of ones I tend to use. I love my HB pencil, which we will be covering after we do charcoal. But we're going to be using charcoal. So I'm going to go to charcoal, and I want to pick Vine Charcoal like I have here. And then I'm going to go to the next one to that is the blender. And so I tap it once to select the tool. If I tap it a second time, that'll give me my menu of different things. And this is, again, already set for Vine Charcoal. So I'm good there. And then I'll go to the third one, which is my eraser, and I'll tap that again. And here I am with Vine Charcoal again, which is what I want. So I want a dark brown with all of these set to Vine Charcoal for our lesson, okay? Now, that's going to be our standard setup for the charcoal lectures, so we'll be using those nonstop for a good number of lessons as I teach you some of the basics. Charcoal is one of the easiest and forgiving methods for learning to draw. You may have used other things, but charcoal is just really good for this, so we're going to have a lot of fun with charcoal. I want to go one more step here and look at some of the differences between these different brushes. So now I'm going to go back to the brush here. Now I'm in charcoal, and charcoal is a kind of medium that I call an opaque medium. And you'll see over on the side here, I'm going to move up the slider a bit so we can have a big thing here. And charcoal is what's known as an opaque medium, and it tends to keep to opaque. And we can turn that opacity all the way up to get the best view of this. And so it just blocks things out. And it doesn't do much even when you have this opacity down, but it just makes dark marks, okay? Now, the second type of media is what I tend to call transparent media. And if you hit the brush, and I'm going to go to ink for this, there's a bunch of them, but marker is a good example of this. And marker with an opacity of about 50% like we have here will make a mark. And if I make it a little bigger here, you'll see what happens is as I cross over my old marks, those become darker. And that's a usual behavior of the transparent media, is that they will darken the media below them in a way like this one, okay? Now the third one, and we can go over here to painting, and I'm going to use oil paint for this. And oil paint does something else. It mixes. So these are what I call the mixing medium. They're actually doing some blending, what your blend tool over here does, while it's also painting. So if I just make a mark, for example, over this, you can see how it spreads through the mark, and it takes some of the color underneath it as part of the color there. That's the three major ones that you're going to be using, and there's lots of variations in the brushes about that. We're going to stick with charcoal because it makes it easy. It's a simple media to use, and some of the other problems you find with the transparent mixing don't show up so easily and make you have more control while you're starting out. So your challenge today is going to be to play around with the brushes. So go ahead and play with the brushes. Now, we're going to be using that brown color for now, but you can certainly go ahead and change the color around for a bit and, just play around with some color if you want, and, take some other brushes here. Another one of my favorites here is the artistic one, is this hearts, and you can put the hearts one in there, and it actually works well with different opacities too. I'll put that up a little bit. Or you may throw some yellow in there, or green, or let's put some cyan. And you can just make some fun things, and I'll go back over here maybe to, painting, and we'll throw some stucco. Look at what these things do and how they do them. And just play around with the brushes and make some kind of fun abstract art like I got here. And then when you're done with that, go ahead and share your experiment with me on Twitter. So just, again, go to your actions and go to share and make a JPEG. Go to Twitter. And I'm going to put in here and so we'll just make that Steve Lipton so I can see it. And there I am. And go ahead and tweet that to me. And that will be what you will do. So go ahead and play with any of the brushes you wish. There's not much process here, but please go ahead and tweet me so I can see all the fun things you're doing. And we're really going to start drawing next. So don't forget to subscribe so you'll get all the upcoming lessons while we start working in charcoal, and you don't miss any of those episodes. And check out the series webpage. You'll find a link for that in the description below.